Navigating Geopolitics, the Role of Public Policy and ESG in Shaping Global Communication Strategies. The topic for the moment for this fireside chat right now is the role of public policy and ESG in shaping global communication strategies. This session, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be chaired by Rahul Kashyap, who's the Executive Director of PRP Group. A huge round of applause for Rahul Kashyap, please, as I welcome him over here on stage.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Adgali. One of the advantages of being the chair for such events is that you get to meet such illustrious and accomplished people in such close proximity. So, loud shout of thanks to Bijoya and her team. Thank you so much. And that wasn't really loud. So, thank you so much, Adgali, for this event. And especially this topic is very important because we often say politics is personal or personal is political. But over here we are talking about geopolitics. Every government works in its own national interest. And this national interest may often be in conflict with other countries, and that can have devastating impact on the overall existence of countries. The most recent Ukraine war or the conflict in Israel-Gaza belt is west side is a clear example of this. Right from oil diplomacy to war diplomacy to arms and ammunition to agriculture. Every aspect of our life is guided or influenced by geopolitics. So we have a very accomplished panel today who have done a lot in matters of intergovernmental public policy and how it affects businesses across the globe. So it is very interesting to know how, because as communicators we tend to believe that we are the ones who shape government policies, or we want to believe that we are the ones who are having an influence on how governments behave, how their policies are created. But over here I would like to understand, and I think the audience would also be hugely interested to know, how government policies and geopolitics affects communication strategies. That would be quite a learning session for us. So we have with us Sonal Singh ma'am, who is the corporate communications head of Jindal Stainless. We have Sanghpriya Gautam, who is a public affairs expert and director of Speyside, and Mr. Anil Patni, who is the EU public policy expert. So let me begin with Sanghpriya. How do you think, geopolitics affects the communication strategies, or how it works in the global scenario?
Thank you, Rahul, for the kind introduction. So I'll start with, I think I'll also give a background. So the present world we live in is the sum total consequences of the policies forged by the geopolitical events in the history. So if you look at the geopolitical events throughout the history, so they have shaped majority of the public policies in almost all the countries. I'll go back in past and I think let's say talk about World War. So by the time World War was about to getting finished in 1944, 41 nations met at a place called Bretton Woods and they formed two institutions. So the reason for the meeting was that the world was devastated, infrastructure was in shambles, economy was also not doing very well. So what these nations decided, if at all the war happens ever, right, what we will do, how we will make these countries rebuild again. So they made two very important institutions, IMF and World Bank. So IMF, which bails out the economies, right, the way they did in 1991 with India. They gave us the money because we were struggling with the deficit that time. and World Bank, which gives loans for the infrastructure projects. Then second wave of public policy formation comes in form of Cold War because of the ideological differences between the Soviet Union and US. So all kind of races started happening. So we see the space exploration race. We have seen the arms and ammunition race. So had this not been started way back, let's say during the Cold War era, and our India's affinity towards Russia, can we see, the kind of space exploration program we have now today, or the companies we see across like SpaceX doing so wonderfully at the global stage? Now, third comes the fall of Berlin Wall, like 1989, I believe. So 1989, that was also, this event is also termed as closure of Cold War era. But then what all started with this fall of Berlin Wall? Soviet Union got disintegrated, right? Soviet Union got disintegrated and your market liberalization started. Then happened Gulf War, right? 1991, 92, 89 and 91. So I think that was the time when markets were opening up. And with Gulf War, if you all remember, that was the only, that was the first war in the history which got covered 24/7 by the media. CNN covered it 24/7. Now, what happened with that war? The oil prices just went haywire. So India, as a developing economy, had to face a lot of problems because of the energy security. So, and that was the time everyone started talking about energy security and others, and which was again followed by 1991, India opening up its door for the for the markets and liberalization. Then so many more events have happened, like 9/11. So if we are entered into the hotels, we see we have to check our bags through that machine, the security protocols at the airport. So everything got changed after 9/11. Then I think in 1998, I'll just add the last one. So 1998, Pokhran happened. So what Pokhran did for India, right? So India, even after being an open economy, a lot of sanctions were made by the partner countries. US had sanctions on India, economic sanctions on India, Japan, and many other development economies. But I think through diplomacy, through further liberalizing the economy, India played it very well. So I think, yeah, I'll sum it up here.
Thank you, Sanghpriya. Mr. Patni, you have been an EU public policy expert. What has been the European experience?
All right. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this esteemed panel. So, I've had the good luck of working for the European Union in India for a very long period of time. First as a press officer in the EU delegation, and last several years as a consultant working on EU-funded public diplomacy projects. So, I can speak on the experience from the point of view of the Europeans, and to carry forward from where Sanghpriya was saying. So, in fact, in 1950-51 was the time after the World War, after the setting up of the Bretton Woods institution, that actually the seeds of today's European Union were sown, because it was in 1951, 9th May 1951, the then French Foreign Minister Robert Schuman actually made a declaration that, inviting other European countries to come together in a project of peace, because these were the countries which were actually at war with each other, France and Germany. You remember the World War II history. And so he proposed that, let's pool our coal and steel industries together and create a coal and steel community, a European coal and steel community. A Treaty of Paris was signed, 1951. 1957, they said, let's expand this. And a Treaty of Rome was signed, and a European Economic Community was born. So they said, not just coal and steel, we will cooperate with each other on all sectors of the economy. So these were 6 countries at that time: France, Germany, Italy, and the Benelux countries, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg. These 6 countries then became 9, 11, 15, 25, 27, 28, and then again 27. So now it is 27 countries, a group of 27 countries which are represented in India by an organization called the Delegation of the European Union. And of course, the member states, they have their own embassies also. So in the context of public policy, because, today's topic is actually a very large one. Navigating geopolitics is such a large topic, whole night we can sit here and talk about it. But the second part of it is much more specific, which is how do you look at the forces of public policy and ESG shaping global communication strategies? because this is a meeting of the communications community, right? So let me just, say a few words on public policy aspects of this, okay? So in fact, there are a lot of very interesting milestones which have come up in the last 5 years from the European Union side, which are actually deciding the contours of the landscape in which business operates, okay? So you talk about data privacy, you have GDPR, okay, the General Data Protection Rules, which is now like a kind of a pioneer, and other countries are trying to follow. So this is the typical European way of, setting out a standard, and then the rest of the world has to follow. So the GDPR is a big public policy milestone, which is setting the rules for the global communications community now. Similarly, there is a European Digital Services Act and a a Digital Services Act and a Digital Markets Act, which is again setting the rules for large platforms like Google and Facebook and so on. So because these companies, they act like gatekeepers. You have to, they decide the rules and you have to follow them. And then they become monopolies. So how do you deal with the monopolies? So there is a anti-trust kind of a situation which appears. Again, that's a public policy issue. How does the government deal with that? And once you have set out the rules, that then decides the landscape in which your communication happens, and so on and so forth. There are many other aspects which we can talk about, but I'll stop here for now.
Thank you. One, Brexit and the entire communication strategies of governments changed.
Oh, absolutely. Brexit was a big surprise because nobody was expecting it to happen. But that's what happens when you put things to a vote.
So geopolitics and the uncertainty of it. From global to the European experience, for the India part, I would request Madam Sonal Singh to say, how do you see that geopolitics affects government decisions and the effect of it on the corporate side of it?
So, thank you first of all. And you said that communicators fancy themselves to play a big role in geopolitics. I wish it was as true as that. I believe a lot of communication strategies kick in after the geopolitical disaster has already happened. So, for instance, I represent the manufacturing sector in India. All of us have known how toys industry in India got annihilated by China. And such was also the case with electronics, with pharma, with chemicals. Slowly businesses were going out, they were shutting shops, and suddenly the market was being flooded with imports. And this kept continuing in India and US and EU and several other markets until a tectonic shift happened in the Trump government, where Section 232 was imposed and imports were stopped from China. And it was done to protect jobs in America. Now that one decision changed the world order from globalization to nationalization. Until then, there were enough and more researches that was indicating to the government that our industries are closing down. There were enough and more association representations to the cabinet ministers, to the parliamentary committees, that we need to staunch imports from China. But that one decision of Trump triggered governments all across the world to take action. So I believe geopolitical crisis or decisions are always important on the communications agenda, but they become urgent only when the crisis hits.
As it did in the case of Galwan.
Yes. And for instance, you look at the Red Sea crisis as of today. Now, everybody in manufacturing, it is a very widely acknowledged fact that India lacks critical minerals. Now we have a policy on critical mineral exploration. We have always known that containers are not owned by India. So 70% of containers in the world are owned by Chinese and remaining are owned by US and America. So if you want a very high quality good imported into the country, you have to ask them for containers. Now, if we know the situation and there are enough research papers also published on this subject, why is it that even after canvassing and public advocacy and a lot of corporate affairs efforts, such decisions have not been taken? So it is also because India is such a large behemoth. There are so many other pressing issues in front of the government that sometimes, things have just to be jerked into action. And that comes whenever the crisis strikes.
Thank you so much. I'll come to you, Mr. Patni. ESG is a very critical aspect of geopolitics, and it's become, part of how we judge businesses are done. But there is always a side where we think that it has been weaponized. Do you agree? You disagree? And how critical is the ESG part in our business strategies?
Right. So we have to understand the journey of how we reached where we have reached, you know. So before this buzzword of ESG came around, which is last 5 years, 7 years, we had something called CSR. Now people have stopped using CSR. They've moved on to ESG. But essentially, if you look at the economic history of last 70 years of India, I mean, you know, leading companies have always, you know, the big groups have always had a social aspect to their business. They have reached out to the immediate social communities where they operate, and this is purely from a strategic point of view of running your business well. You know, so if you are running a coal mine and you are surrounded by 100 villages, you obviously need to take care of them. That's good for your business also, no? So this is like give and take. So this was social responsibility, and then over a period of time, CSR evolved into ESG because, you know, the thought came that it should not be just social responsibility. Equally and perhaps more important is the environmental responsibility, and this is in the context of the sweeping wave of awareness which came after the you know, United Nations came up with the environmental reports and the IPCC reports, and so because of that, the awareness about the rising temperatures, the need to limit the global warming to 2 degrees less than the required number, all of that has come, and now the companies are forced to become good citizens. They have to pay attention to their carbon footprint, and in order to do that, they obviously have to invest in renewable energy, in energy efficiency measures. So this then has been put under a framework of environmental social governance. That's how we come to the ESG. And this is not just talk, this is now law, okay? So in Europe, you have a European climate law. In India also now it is compulsory for the top 1,000 companies, okay? Top 1,000 as listed by SEBI market capitalization. They have to compulsorily report on their environmental performance on a report called, you know, the social responsibility report that they have come up with. So this is going on.
So thank you. Sanghpriya, the question is whether mountain must come to Muhammad or Muhammad must come to the mountain.
No, I'll just take forward what Anil sir was saying. So ESG, again, it's a very important milestone. So why it is required, right? So I think first is we need to ask it ourselves why it is required. Everyone in this world is using resources. We sitting in this room is using electricity. We are sitting, you know, manpower and other things. And so it happens with every company. So that's why when you are taking something from the environment, when you're using the resources, so you should always think of, you know, giving it back. So that's how the environmental aspect of ESG comes in. Second part is social aspect. So sir talked about, you know, that Coal India used to have been doing mining in India for the longest time. And yes, I think at one point of time when Coal India in 2014 came up with their IPO, the number of beds with Coal India or the hospitals with Coal India was more than the Fortis. So that's the kind of social integration these companies have been doing. But again, it's very, very less. I mean, it's not, even now, I mean, we see that, you know, a lot of companies, when they try to go for mining, when the roads are being made in India, a lot of resistance comes from the local people. One, probably the narrative is not right. Probably their requirements, their needs are not considered, right? So that's why the social aspect is very, very important. It's very holistic. I mean, we see a lot of companies struggling with, you know, this CSR part also. They are not even able to find the right CSR partner in India. And you know, we are not even talking about the sustainability of the CSR programs in India. I mean, companies give money funding to one good program for 3-5 years and they completely stop it. But the people who are like receiving those funds, who are getting benefited, that also stops there. And coming on the governance, I mean, we all grew up in Delhi. I grew up in Delhi. So I think by the time I was in 6th or 7th standard, I mean, the newspapers used to come stamped, Delhi is the rape capital of India. That's the governance part. Let's say IMNC is coming to India. They want to set up their office in Gurgaon region. But we are notorious that, you know, women are not safe in Gurgaon, let's say. But so the kind of, then goes the investment part into it, right? To, you know, to make women feel secure. You need to provide, let's say, a cab and other things. And all these part, ESG, it's about investment. But this investment is not negative, right? You get really good returns. And there are researches by McKinsey and others which says that, if you are investing in the ESG right, your companies are perceived in a very positive way, and you reap the benefits at a later stage.
Thank you so much. In fact, I will not let go of this opportunity that Sonalji is here. Apart from ESG, there is also a gender issue in geopolitics. There is a strong voice that says, if women were in more powerful positions in the world, it will be a safer, more peaceful world. How do you see that, and how do you see an Indian resonance to that?
Very interesting point of view. How many women are there in the hall? Yeah, enough. So, well, first allow me to persist on the train of thought that Mr. Patni put, because it is linked. Now, I was working for the public sector for a very long time, and you're very right that ESG fundamentals were ingrained in business principles. We had a unit where 35,000 people worked and only 10,000 people worked in production. The rest other were making roads, making houses, doing CSR, running schools, running hospitals, etc., etc. So ESG was not a new concept, but for the private sector, it forces them to, one, get into a lot of initiatives, make sure that the expenditure is done at the right places, and also
reporting is so important. Actually,
yes.
Reporting forces them.
Yes, and the latest, for instance, geopolitical turn of events happened through CBAM. You are an expert of that subject, where European Union is now forcing people who import into Europe. For us, Europe is 50% of our export market, to report emission numbers at each stage of production. This is unheard of. And we are sure that this is going to set a precedence not just in European market, but I'm sure US market and maybe eventually even Indian market, because that was the need of the hour. Now coming to where women fit into the picture, I think the more and more women, not just as regards geopolitical concerns or manufacturing space or politics in general, the representation of women has been abysmally low. In the entire manufacturing setup, probably the best companies will have 16% women representation. In India, I think in political scenario, we have about 19% of women representation. And does adding women into the workforce make it a better place? I think diversity has its own role. It's not just about women, it is also about bringing in people from different ethnicities, different regions, because diversity and different perspectives force you to be rational. They force you to consider the other point of view. And yes, I think women are very professional wherever they are.
So thank you so much, and it was intellectually very invigorating and very, very great learning experience.
One last point before we close. I mean, I really want to say this. When we are talking about ESG, and this is a community of communicators, so I really want to make this point, and please don't get me wrong, but the PR guys, the corporate communications guys, please be very careful about greenwashing, okay? You all work for different companies. Companies are now forced to get into ESG, especially if you are a top 1,000 company. And your management may be interested, may not be interested. They are, like literally being forced into it, kicking and screaming. Okay? But once you are there, please do an honest job of this. That is the only way to have a good corporate reputation. Because if you only do window dressing, this greenwashing business can backfire big time and you will have a reputational problem at hand. So if one message you want to take back home from this ESG session is, please, for God's sake, avoid greenwashing. Be truthful about what you're saying. Make incremental progress. Showcase the incremental progress, but don't exaggerate too much. Be honest.
I'll keep that in mind.
This may lead to sparks flying in the hall itself. So I'll rather avoid that. Thank you so much. So thank you so much. It was such a great panel.
Any questions from the audience?
And, if there are any questions, we would love to have. Yes, please.
I joined quite late. I'm sure it must have got addressed, but I wanted to know a little bit more about PRSR reporting. Of late, what has happened is it's more of just feeling the need for reporting as a matter of fact. But how much of truth goes in BRSR report is a question to be validated. So anything on it?
I think let's give them credit for the fact that if they're printing something on paper, companies will not say something completely, they will not lie. They will not lie on print, okay? So the fact that they are forced to print, they are forced to give data, and there is a format for the BRSR, as you know, and you have to show how much, compliance you have done and how you are meeting the, UN SDG goals through the BRSR, etc. So therefore, there is a kind of conscious effort which has been drilled into the companies because of this, and eventually that's the right direction to take, because frankly speaking, out of all the 1,000 companies, maybe not all the boards are so environmentally conscious. People will say, listen, I have a job to do, which is to run my business. I'm not here for the CSR and the ESG. But sorry, that's what the mandate is now.
And I am the they here in question, by the way. So, BRSR, annual report, website compliance, all other compliance, I have a full team that is doing that throughout the year. So you can imagine the seriousness that goes into the process and the amount of sweat I have to, from August to September, the amount of reporting that goes into compliance is probably all that corporate communication does for all big listed companies. So it is huge effort, and it has to be sincere, it's printed.
Any more questions? One last question that we may have time for. Anyone?
Does anyone have any question? One last question we have bandwidth. Anyone wants to ask anything? Yeah, if you want to connect offline. You have both the options. I guess they preferred the second one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to all of you. Huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for all these wonderful people over here, taking time from their respective busy schedules to be with us. It's a busy weekday. Can I please have our photographers over here for a group photo with all of them over here?